Margaret, what about former Vice President Biden? What did his response, just a few days after he had a controversy over comments he made last week, we discussed on this program, what did his handling, his response reveal about his campaign?
Well, you heard, I thought it was a particularly specific phrase in that speech that Joe Biden used, which was to talk about how this election in this moment is again about the struggle for the soul of this country. It reminded me of when he launched this campaign and casting it at the time as motivated by Charlottesville, another moment of hate and divisiveness, and Biden saying he wants to run to restore something of America. That is how he has framed this. In terms of how his campaign handled it in the moment, you had fairly predictable response from the campaign, which is they put him forward on cable news. They put him forward to answer those questions with a nod towards what you referenced was his verbal misstep, as he characterized it, just a week ago. But I think the broader political moment we're in raises so many more questions about, does this moment equal a political movement? Is what we're seeing that in this very specific case of police brutality and racial division in Minneapolis represents something more to the country at this moment of such heightened tension. You see other protests in the country, and as an observer of political movements here, you have to wonder if this tension is bubbling over in a way that goes beyond just a week. If this becomes something more, and not just in terms of the election 6 months ago, but what is being shaped in this moment when you look at the tremendous amount of inequality that has been just deepened by the past 3 months or so of this pandemic. Right. It is Black and Hispanic America that has been hit the hardest by the job cuts, by the virus. And it is just widening the divisions we knew were existing.
Let's get into that, because Margaret's point is so important. What will this moment trigger beyond this week? Tragedy after tragedy. Will this Floyd case, this tragedy, trigger something? And Yamiche, you spoke with the Floyd family. Rodney Floyd, Mr. Floyd's brother, as well as his cousin, Sharita Tate. Let's listen a little bit.
The firing of the officers is a start, but ultimately we would like to see them arrested, charged, and convicted of murder. They had no compassion, any sort of remorse, no level of humanity. They executed him in front of us, and we watched his life leave his body.
On Friday, as Yamiche said, the now former officer who used his knee to pin down Mr. Floyd was arrested and charged with third-degree murder. Yamiche, does this family, to Margaret's point, expect justice?
This family that is reeling, of course, from the loss of George Floyd, a 46-year-old father, they are hoping for justice, but they also have seen so many cases in this country where justice they think was not served. You think of Eric Garner, who many people saw be strangled, who said, "I can't breathe," some 11 times, no conviction in that case. Then you see George Floyd. The criminal complaint for the officer says that the officer kneeled on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and that for 2 minutes and 53 seconds of that, he was unresponsive. I was talking to the lawyer of the family today, and they said even with those facts, they also look at the fact that the complaint says that not only was his death partially dealing with this asphyxiation, there was also possibly underlying health conditions. So his family and the lawyers are already feeling like his existence as a Black man is already being used against him in the criminal complaint where the officer is being charged with his murder. They also say that the officer is being charged with third-degree murder when they think that this video, the 10-minute video that was posted on Facebook, shows pretty much first-degree murder. They say they don't understand also why any other officers weren't charged. There were 4 officers that were fired, but so far only 1 officer charged. So this family is looking at the criminal justice system, which has incarcerated African Americans and Latinos and people of color at higher rates, and saying, is this the justice system that's going to work for us? We're not sure. The lawyer tells me that they think there's 2 justice systems. There's one for Black America and one for white America. That's how the family's feeling tonight. They're very, very hopeful that this officer might be convicted, but they're not at all thinking that this is a slam dunk because video, they say, has not changed anything. You think of Rodney King and the fact that so many years ago, he was seen getting beaten by those officers. Those officers, of course, then acquitted. So Black America, especially this family, they're not convinced that video evidence is going to make a difference.
Peter, what's your response to that point about what's next on the federal level? You see the Attorney General Bill Barr moving forward with an investigation, but what have we learned from the past, from this administration, from previous administrations about how civil rights cases are handled at the federal level and what kind of action is really taken?
Well, that's a great question, and it kind of depends on where things end up with the local prosecution, of course. The federal government has stepped in historically in cases where the local authorities have been either unable or unwilling to prosecute cases that seem to be so in need of prosecution. In this case, you've got the county prosecutor, perhaps belatedly, according to his critics, 4 days later, but now pressing charges against one of the officers. He was asked why not the other 3 officers. He says they're still looking at that and that may yet come later. So it may be that the federal role is to keep that pressure on the local authorities until they act. And it may be that they decide to take it on themselves beyond that. There's plenty of precedent for the federal government to come in with civil rights charges on top of local charges of murder. Murder is generally, in this kind of circumstance, a local crime or a state crime, but they can charge under federal civil rights statutes deprivation of your civil rights. And the question then becomes, broader than these individual officers. Is there a larger question about this police department? Is the training there adequate? Is there a larger pattern of behavior? That's where you saw the federal government come in Ferguson, Missouri, for instance, under President Obama, where they took a look at the broader pattern of behavior by the police department there. And that's what I think a lot of people would expect to see out of a Justice Department that wants to take a serious look at it. We'll see whether this administration proceeds in that direction.